Welcome to the Culture, Faith, and Politics podcast. I'm Pat Kahnke, and I'm here today with Chris Volpe, who's a candidate to replace the Senate seat in Ohio that JD Vance vacated when he became vice president. And so this is going to be a fun conversation for me, just to hear how Chris got into this race and his goals for the race, and also just a lot of background on who he is and everything. So this is fun. So Chris, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Why don't you, first of all, just tell us a little bit about who you are, like what you've been doing and how you got into this race.
Sure. Yeah. Well, before I do that, I want to thank you for being on the show. Before we started, I mentioned that the YouTube algorithm had presented your channel to me, and I watched a couple of your videos. And particularly after the one about your July 4th experience, I was like, I got to reach out to this guy. He seems like a really interesting person to talk to. And so thank you for having me on. So yeah, my name is Chris Volpe. I live in beautiful Columbus, Ohio. Lived in Ohio pretty much all my life. I was born here. My dad was in the Navy, and so we lived in the Philippines for a little bit, Rhode Island for a little bit. But I just turned 44 a couple weekends ago, and 90% of that has been here in Ohio. And I'm sort of in a unique position, maybe. I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I never really thought about going into politics. My background is healthcare. That's kind of what I was in for a long time. And then now I own a video game and software company. So I do a lot of stuff in tech, a lot of stuff in education and healthcare. But I kind of just, I guess after the election, it sort of hit me. And then about February of this year, I just sort of started thinking, when you're a kid, you kind of think that like, oh, your parents and your grandparents, they got everything figured out. Like it's all under control. And then at some point you realize like, no, they do not have this under control. And I'm just the kind of person where I was like, I feel like this is an important time to stand up and do something. And I got to do it because I just don't know if I could kind of live with myself if I didn't. And interestingly, Ohio has our open Senate seat coming up because, like you mentioned, JD Vance was our senator. And then when he became vice president, our governor DeWine appointed John Husted for 2 years. So JD Vance was in for 2 years, Husted's in for 2 years, and then the remaining 2 years is up for election next year in a special election. And I was like, you know what? Let's just give it a shot, see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can so relate to that idea of where I think history sort of finds you, where I retired from ministry. We chatted just for a minute before we went on here, but I'll just give you a little bit of background on me because I can relate to you jumping into the race like that. I retired from ministry in 2016. And for 20 years before that, I hadn't been following politics. I had been a conservative Republican before that, involved in pro-life, all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I went into ministry and I intentionally detoxified. Well, at the time I didn't realize I was detoxifying, but I intentionally shut off all of the right-wing echo chamber stuff that I'd been listening to, the Rush Limbaugh and all that kind of stuff, because I didn't want to mix it with ministry. And it turned out that I detoxified over those 20 years. And when I retired in 2016, I saw what was happening. It was like, oh my gosh, is my party going to do this with this, Donald Trump character? And it turned out they were.
The answer is yes.
Did. Yeah. And so in the same way, I thought, well, what can I do? And this is what I would love for our listeners to, if they take nothing else away from a lot of the things that I talk about, it's you can do something, you can, like, what is it that you can do? And so what I did is I said, well, I've got this background in the exact movement that I think is destroying the country. So I guess I should try talking to them. So how do you sort of see yourself with your background? What are some of the unique things that you bring then to this race?
Yeah, for sure. Before I answer though, I'm kind of curious because you said you started kind of detoxifying, as you say, like well in advance of this. Like what Was there something in your mind where you're like, I should keep these things separate as I go on these journeys? Like,
Yes.
what was that decision point?
Yes. What it was that I had been, like I said, I was part of the pro-life movement. I was a speaker in that movement. But when I went into ministry, I had been listening to Rush Limbaugh. It was, it was after the Clinton era, but I was just, primed for kind of judging people who liked the Democrats back then, because I was listening to just this not constant, but a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I was kind of judging the people in my congregation a little bit, because I was ministering in the city, 2 churches in the city, and I planted one in the city, and it was a very large mix: Democrats, Republicans, age, income level, ethnicity. And I realized, I think I'm in the minority here, first of all, as a conservative Republican.
Mm-hmm.
But I also saw that it just wasn't helpful. I was like, how could I be judging somebody for their political views here in this church? So I thought, I just need to quit listening to this stuff, because I felt it was kind of poisoning my relationships a little bit. And best thing I ever did.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a bold move, and kind of just a astute self-reflection to see that. And nowadays with social media, I tell people all the time, because I talk to tons of people, mm-hmm. and a lot of them actually, when I first started, I was sitting on that couch right over there, and I was thinking about, well, how do I even get started, right? And in the back of my mind, I was like, Democrats have this sort of stereotype of being lectury and finger wavy. And instead mm-hmm. of me trying to go out and like just talk about, like, I mean, no one wants to hear me talk for an hour. I don't know, maybe you do. You're listening to this podcast. So, but I created this banner, and it just says, what's on your mind, come and chat. And I set up at protests. I set up at coffee houses. Actually, some of my earliest conversations have been in religious congregations, which I think is interesting, and I'm sure we'll get to, because I am not religious.
Right.
And so I just decided to go out and talk to people and just see what was on their mind and what was going on, because like you, although I wasn't listening to, Rush Limbaugh, I was listening to a variety of stuff on the internet, and like I kept, kind of hearing the same things over and over again. MAGA people are this, Republicans are that, Democrats are this. And I was like, why don't I just go talk to people instead of like pretending I know what's on folks' minds?
Right.
And it has been an extremely enlightening experience. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah. So what are like some of the more surprising things that you learned when you asked people what's on their mind? Like, you probably had some preconceived notions of what people would be concerned about, but what were some of the more surprising things that you learned?
Yeah, totally. So I think that the first thing, oh, sorry, my dog has my dog baby.
Oh, nice.
So the first thing, I say this all the time, is like, if you were to go and just ask somebody, what do you think is the top priorities for young Democrats or liberals or lefties or whatever? You probably get the same kind of things like Israel-Palestine war, trans rights, those kind of things. That is not what I'm hearing. Really interestingly, younger folks on the left, and actually I had a really interesting conversation with a libertarian the other day. Younger folks are just like, can we just start winning elections, please? Can we stop getting caught every time something is brought up on something? Can we stop getting caught in this 30-day cycle of having to defend it and all of this stuff? So I think that the young folks are, to be honest, I think they're sick of the BS, and they're done with this sort of idea of this system that supposedly is helping them out, but they're not seeing it. They want to start seeing real effective change. Which I think is different than in years past, where you had young people be sort of politically active, but they're not getting caught in the minutia of like every political conversation. They just want to start making the world a better place, taking care of their friends and their family and whatnot. The number one thing I hear when, I'm like, oh, what's on your mind? They'll be like, everything. And I was like, I hear you. Right. It's so much all of the time, everything, everywhere, all at once. Mm-hmm. And as we sit here and talk, we're in the middle. I think we're at like week 2, about to enter week 3 of this Epstein thing.
Right.
And it's
Which
just,
I haven't yet done a video about. I want to, because but it's like I keep waiting to say, let's wait and see a little bit more how it plays out, because it's going so, it's just moving so fast.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that I've told. I am trying to post roughly 3 to 5 videos a week on my, actually, at Volpe for America is my social media. I've got a YouTube
put that
channel
up on the screen too. So
okay, awesome. But I've got a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to post 3 to 5 videos, some of which are me talking. I'm actually doing video game let's plays, where people can come and, while I'm playing, they can come and talk. Because one of my goals is to be the most accessible senator out there, particularly in Ohio. Both of our senators, there's article after article in our local papers about how they're not doing town halls and stuff.
okay.
But anyway, so I am trying to be kind of topical and out there, but I'm also not a news reporter, right? So
Right.
I don't need to respond to the news of the day every day. So like you, I'm kind of trying to like take a few days to digest and see where this goes. But this Epstein thing just kept going.
Right.
But what I saw, and I think it's my best video up there so far. I would highly recommend watching it, but it's called "We Are Being Lied To," and I saw a clip of the Andrew Schultz podcast where he was talking about how Trump is lying to him, and he's like, this isn't what we voted for or whatever, and that really struck me because I think that a lot of people are beginning to realize that Trump's not on the up and up, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, but kind of we on the left or whatever, the argument that I was making is like, when we tell you that Trump is a con man and a liar, and we tell you he's not being truthful to you, it's not because we're trying to trick you or like win some argument. It's because we care about you. You are our family and our friends, and we see you getting sucked into this world. And so I feel you. It's hard to know when to kind of jump in on these comments with this stuff, but from my perspective, since I'm not a reporter, I'm just, whenever it feels right or I feel like I have something to add to the conversations, when I jump in.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I'm at too. Like, I feel like I do a little bit of analysis. I do sort of a polemical thing more than a reporting type thing. It's like the reporting somebody else can do, and I don't feel like I have to be first with any sort of, I got to get a video up about this Epstein thing. It's more like I'm trying to help people process. I'm trying to like process along with me. And so I think that's great. This thing about, you said everything everywhere all at once. I think that's one, that people are concerned about everything. That's something that I saw, like it's something I see at protests when I've gone lately, is that, and this gets to the Democratic thing a little bit. So I'm not a Democrat. I'll never be a Republican. I don't know what I am, but
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Because I see this. So I have always voted Democrat, and I'm using the term. I'm right now in Ohio. I'm the only, as far as I'm aware, I'm the only sort of active Democrat running for the Senate. But I use the phrase specifically, I'm running as a Democrat, because I've just never felt like a political party should be a part of your identity.
Right.
And I feel like this sounds maybe a little weird for a politician to say, but like, I don't owe any loyalty to the Democratic Party. Like, they owe it to me as a supporter of them for many decades here. And so I'm kind of curious from your perspective, that sort of mixing of identity, because I think particularly now, politics and religion almost carry the same kind of weight when it comes to identity, or at least that's kind of what I'm seeing. I'd be curious your thought on that.
Yeah, and that's a little bit what I'm getting at, is that I did see the Republican Party as a big part of my identity when I was younger. I mean, I was raised in it, and the melding of faith and politics felt normal to me decades ago, and now I see it as a poison. I mean, I just don't think the two should be melded the way that they were. But the identity thing, like I've said, I just said I'll never vote Republican again. It's not true. What I've actually said quite clearly is, and this goes back to the Exodus, but I will vote for the Republicans again once they've done 40 years in the wilderness. And when they've done 40 years in the wilderness, and this generation of Republican leadership has passed away, has passed out, then after 40 years, I'll vote for him again. But it's like because what I see is that this entire generation of Republican leaders has become this MAGA thing. And I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon with one person, moving out of the system. And so my identity, I think it was a huge mistake that I made when I was younger, to wrap my identity up with a party. And so I was going to ask you about this everything everywhere all at once aspect of those protests. And so I've heard, this is something about the Democrats that I'm trying to figure out, is how, and you've brought it up already. You said they want to win. The young people want to win, for crying out loud, and I see a lot of hand wringing, where Republicans don't hand wring. They just do stuff, they just, and they do obnoxious, stuff that breaks things.
Sure.
And they don't apologize. They do another obnoxious thing and another one. And when I go to the protest, what I see from the Democrats is something that I think is beautiful, which is all sorts of issues, all sorts of, you see signs, and you see, like 100 different issues that people care about. But then I hear like some of the national Democrats saying, well, this is a problem, we need to focus our message. And I'm going, I'm not sure that's right. I think there's something really good about a movement that's saying, hey, I can't articulate it in one sentence what's wrong, but in my life, I'm seeing this. And then you get 1,000 people together, and they're talking about, and then they together say, kind of looks like fascism, or it kind of looks like authoritarianism. Maybe that's what we're protesting. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like, so I don't know. I feel like Democrats haven't quite figured out on a national level yet how to talk about this. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So, my responsibility is sort of to the people of Ohio, and then also to America. And it may surprise you, but I have little to no say in what the National Democratic Party says as a thing. But my take is, I think you are right about the sort of the fascism, whatever it is, if it's fascism or no kings, or like it's this little thread where people, well, it's not little, but it's a thread where people are like, the house is on fire. Let's take care of the fire first. Then we can talk about how to rebuild it and outfit it. And so I think that is a really strong message that I know on the national scale, I hear this a lot. People criticize Kamala Harris's campaign for being like, oh, you spent too much time talking about saving democracy and authoritarianism. And I don't quite think that's true. I actually think she didn't do it as much or as fervently as she probably could have. And I say this because if you go back and watch like her acceptance speech and a couple of other big rallies, she had some really powerful moments in there, like a couple of lines that were like really strong. And then you never heard them again. And I'm sure she walked off the stage and there was some consultant that was like, oh, this isn't going to test well or whatever. But I think that's kind of where we're at. And also what I have I would say moderately successful at is when I'm talking to people, is they'll come up to me, like the natural question is like, well, what's your platform, right? And I was like, well, instead of me kind of sitting here and telling them about my platform, like what's important to you? Like, again, let's have a conversation about what matters to you, and then we can begin to figure out how to solve those problems. You asked me earlier about one of the things that's maybe a little bit different from me. And I know this sounds silly to people, but my work in the video game and software industry, making games, like that's all, first of all, cutting edge of technology. So like I would be one of the few senators that even understands the basics of how the internet and AI and stuff works, which is kind of scary. But video game development, software development, it's all about complex problem solving. It's how do you identify these issues? How do you work together as a team to solve these problems? And so that's kind of what I'm doing when I talk to people. I was like, okay, here is your concerns. I share many of those concerns. I'm also very open with people. Like my term will be a 2-year term. So it's like, as soon as I start, I'm going to be probably back to campaigning again shortly after. So I need to be very kind of specific about what I can accomplish in that 2-year period, as well as, I mean, we don't know how the midterms are going to go, right? Like this is in 2026. So if it's a blue wave, like a lot of people are predicting, then that opens up the doors for more bold change. And I'm somebody who thinks that the infrastructure that has been built out over the past, we'll say since World War II, past 60, 70 years, and this has been echoed with a lot of older people I've talked to, is they don't want to see that progress disappear. Like we have had 70 years of even in my lifetime. I was born in 1981. I'm a first year millennial. Just the amount of progress that we've had in numerous things is incalculable, and we should be very careful about undoing that just for the sake of burning it down. But that being said, we do have to acknowledge that this system is not working for younger people. And I actually saw a really interesting article yesterday that Democrats and younger people under 35 do not care at all about the Democratic Party, and they do not have any love for our sort of institutions. And so I think, to answer your question, I think Democrats need to be keenly aware that if we are not offering real world solutions to folks, it's going to fall apart. And as somebody, like, I'm not independently wealthy, I'm not rich. You know, I own a software company, but like I live in a 1-bedroom apartment that I rent. I also feel that, where as somebody who's been working a long time, owns multiple businesses, I have 2 master's degrees, I'm struggling. I'm working paycheck to paycheck. So I get it. I totally get it.
Right. Yeah. The software thing, by the way, I should tell you, when I retired from ministry in 2016, the way I retired at 50. So, you know,
Nice.
I did a 20, I didn't retire, you know, unless you're a crook, ministry is not a route to retiring at 50.
Totally.
Wealthy.
Neither is video games.
So, but I still had to work. So I went into software engineering. So I did 7 years as a software engineer. Yeah, that's how I made my living for 7 years. And then while I was writing my first book, I did that. And then to transition into doing this full time, I bought a refrigerator truck, and it gave me the flexibility. You know, so I quit the software engineering to drive a refrigerator truck for almost 2 years, and now I'm selling the truck and I'm just doing this full time. But it's just, you know, you kind of find your way. You kind of, it's the world has changed. You don't just start a career at, you know, 22 years old anymore and stick it with that company for 40 years.
Totally. I mean, I was in healthcare before that. I was on my way to medicine. Before that, I have a fine arts degree in photography. I've jumped around to a lot of, I mean, I've got like 5 jobs now. So, I do a lot of different stuff. I've been a teacher for over a decade, at sort of the collegiate level. But yeah, that idea that you are particularly in the tech and video game space. I mean, I don't know if you saw Xbox just laid off almost 10,000 people last week.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, you're just not going to be in a job for, I mean, really, like 5 years is kind of a lot of time these days. And it's just a different thing. And I'll rant here for 1 second if you wouldn't mind, because this is something that I've found, particularly for older folks that I've had conversations with that tend to be, I'd say, a little more right-leaning.
Mm-hmm.
It has been very difficult to have a conversation with them and have them understand that the world that exists now is not just a different version of the world that existed when they were coming up. And it is a completely different, just functioning society. And, you know, I hear a lot, I was talking to a younger person a couple days ago, and you hear a lot about how, you know, it used to be millennials and now it's Gen Z, how they're all lazy and, you know, they just want stuff. And I was like, the data just doesn't prove that out. Both millennials and Gen Z as a generation, if you just look at higher graduation rates from both high school and college, higher rates of volunteerism, higher rates of extracurricular activities, higher rates of military involvement, by every metric, millennials and Gen Z worked way harder than Gen X and baby boomers did. And they're having to do that just to hopefully meet close to the same level of economic opportunity. Hell, there was an article last week in Ohio. I'll ask you this.
Mhm.
For a family of four, what do you think the family income needs to be today, in today's dollars, to match the purchasing power of a family of four in the mid 90s in Ohio?
I'm not even going to guess because I'm just going to, yeah, tell me.
So it's over $225,000.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the article that just came out. Somewhere
Just to
between,
match the lifestyle, the
yeah,
basic.
to
So to
match
have
the,
a
yeah,
maybe a 3 bedroom home uh, for a family. Is that kind of what you're saying? To have
yeah, to be able to have
the
a nice home, like kind of in the suburbs, be able to afford
Mhm,
college and taking care of two or three kids,
mhm.
family of four, but so that'd be two kids, maybe a dog. Um, it's just the costs have gotten so out of control. I had a conversation with my dad once. So I was born in 1981. My father is a physician. He was going through med school in around that time, and doing his residency. In 1981, you could go to college full time during the school year, have summers off, work part time during the school year, full time during the summer. You could pay for your college tuition, your books, your room and board, and have money left over in savings. And this is just at a public institution. If you did that today, you would be in the hole somewhere between $7,000 to $15,000.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it just, the numbers just don't match
Right.
anymore, and we're
Right.
all feeling it.
Right. Yeah, and I see that with my kids. They're in that millennial slash Gen Z. And
Mm-hmm.
they're working hard. They're working hard, and it's a struggle in a way that I grew up without what we didn't have a lot of money. What we had was stability in our family and in our just the system that I was growing up in. And I just grew up with this incredible work ethic because my parents both, they were both school teachers, but they both also had these businesses and all this kind of stuff. So what I had was a sense that if I work hard, if I just apply myself and work hard, I'll be able to make it in life. There was this kind of a stable system I could rely on within that system, I could do things. I don't know that young people nowadays feel that stability is there. It just seems like because I do see people working hard, but it's like there doesn't seem to be this. If I put in these inputs, I can count on some stability to have these outputs come
Yeah.
from it. And
Absolutely. I
yeah.
think at the end of the day, what you're hitting on is when we live in a society, we all sort of have a social contract with each other and with the government. And that contract is not being upheld by our leaders and by the powerful, if you want to say that. And
Right.
so it's really hard to feel stable when you're just one injury, for example, away from not being able to work, right?
Right.
Healthcare is a big thing for me. I think that we should be providing a sort of universal healthcare system for everybody, because I don't think you can have a healthy and productive society if, like, literally you walk out the door and, I got hit by a drunk driver once, for example.
Hmm.
I was fortunate that, my car was totaled. I thought I was going to die at the time when I was in it, but my car was totaled. I was fortunate that my injuries were minor, but I still, like, my left shoulder is still messed up. I had to do therapy on it. But like that, I didn't do that, right? I had no
Hmm.
responsibility for that. But you go out, you drive to work, you get hit by somebody, and you could become disabled or have tens, if not $100,000 in medical expenses. And just, there's a really interesting, again, stat where it's over 60% of our bankruptcies in the United States are medically related, and
Mm.
80% of those had health insurance. So, like,
Wow.
sit with that for a second. Like, if you're sitting there and you're doing everything right, and then you end up getting cancer. My best friend, 45, just got diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. He
Mm.
didn't
I'm
he didn't
sorry.
he didn't do anything to deserve that. And now he was fortunate. He does have insurance and he's able to sort of collect some disability while he's going through his treatments here. But um, I guess luck shouldn't be the main determinant on how we take care of our people.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. And this is one of those things as somebody who was a former Republican. I've swung all the way to the left on the healthcare thing. you know, because it's like through family experiences that we've had, just the people that, you know, and then being a pastor in the city for 20 years, you know, the people you just encounter an entire world that, like, as a just kind of a middle class guy from rural Minnesota before that, I just hadn't seen. But now I've swung all the way over to, you know, whatever, however that works. I don't know the ins and outs of how to make it work, but yeah,
I would jump in because I think you just hit on something too. You asked me about how do we sort of message with what we want to do. I found it really disconcerting, not as like, I hate saying I'm a politician, but just as a guy, where the Democrats for some reason feel like they always have to like defend their values.
Right.
You know, instead of, you mentioned the Republicans just kind of like go for it, right? Like,
yeah, and in some really heinous ways.
Sure.
And it doesn't affect. I always think, why are what are you afraid of? Not you, I'm saying the Democrat, you know,
the royal you.
Because it's like you're trying to do some things that people like. And what do you care, the commercials that these people who are talking about Jewish space lasers make against you? You know what I'm saying? It's like this asymmetrical messaging and asymmetrical warfare going on.
Absolutely.
In the messaging world.
Well, that last thing you mentioned there, I'd love to talk about, you know, a little bit later, where I think that the government is filled with unserious people right now.
Right.
But to answer your question, what I do, for better or worse, and I always say, like, I mean, I don't know if this is going to work, right? I'm just trying to talk to people. Ohio in 2024 had almost $450 million spent on that Senate race between Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno. So this is probably going to be a hotly contested thing. So what I'm doing is I'm just talking to people, and you mentioned healthcare. Instead of talking about the ins and outs of a 15-point plan around revitalizing healthcare, I just talk about, like, imagine if you were able to walk out of your house and know that no matter what happened, you and your family will be taken care of. And you won't have to spend, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars or whatever. So I'm just trying to put it in terms of, like, what is the goal we're actually trying to do here, right? Like, what kind of world are we trying to make? Because I think that the Democrats in general haven't constructed a vision of what a better world can look like. And you mentioned something before about just kind of what people worry about. I think people really, at the end of the day, they're thinking about three things. The first is that they want to know that them and their family are safe and taken care of. Mm-hmm. The second is they want to know what, if they work hard, like you said, there'll be some outputs for it. You know, they get a return, and that they can find meaningful work. Mm-hmm. And then the third is, I think they just want to be left the F alone. Like, I think it's really simple. And if you can construct a vision for people where, hey, I want to give you as much personal and economic freedom and opportunity as possible so that you can go out and live the life that you find meaningful, even if that means that I don't necessarily agree with it or whatever. Like, I want to do that for you. Right. And I think that when we can create this infrastructure, and we can talk all about, you know, how our, you know, tax system and our reinvestments into us and infrastructure is falling apart too, because I think that's a large part of it. But ultimately, what I would like to do is sort of reset all of us so that we're all aligned in the same direction, so that your success also leads to my success, and that hopefully our success will lead to the next generation's success and being able to move. I actually had a really interesting conversation at dinner with my ex-wife last night. And she mentioned something, and we were talking about younger folks, and she kind of talked about how she was like, man, when I was 12, you know, I had to be working full time and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, but don't we want to make it better? Don't we want to make it so our children don't have to do the things that we did? And she kind of stopped for a second. She's like, yeah, you're totally right. Like, I think we all tend to get caught in, like, how hard it was for us. Right. And then we need our kids to go through, like, you want your kids to have some friction because it helps them grow and develop. Like you said, I imagine there was probably a lot of tension when you started making your sort of personal journey out, and that conflict can be a real good growth opportunity.
Yeah, there still is tension.
Yeah, I'm sure.
FYI.
Yeah, this just in.
Yeah, one thing that I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I'm curious about it. Just a little side topic that you
Mhm.
might know. I guarantee you know more about this than me.
Okay.
So like you mentioned AI, for instance. So
Hmm.
like when I think one of the things that you said here, about that point number two, that people want to know that they can have meaningful work, and something I have no opinion on. Well, I think I do, but it's an uneducated one. Is on AI regulation, the effects. So the software industry, for instance. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the reasons that the layoffs happened that you mentioned at Xbox are related to AI. I'm guessing in some ways, maybe not, but then just the I use AI every day. I use Chat GPT every day for research, and I'm like learning all that sort of thing.
Hmm.
The what are the issues that like the federal government ought to be concerned about around AI in terms of there's I think there's fears that people have that my jobs are going to be going away. That's one fear. Then there's this whole surveillance state fear that people have. And what kind of thought have you given to that? What can you help people to just kind of even know what are the issues we ought to be thinking about with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we could probably do a whole hour on this, but
Right.
so
Well, you can come back and do it too,
yeah, I'm happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should have mentioned before the show, but I have no time after this, so we can go as long
Okay.
as you want. So I think the first thing that I always say in regards to both AI as well as sort of just the general structure of society now is that you have legitimate fears. Those are
Mm-hmm.
legitimate fears and questions that we should be talking about, because the reality is, and I think that we have seen really over the past 20 years very heavily, is that, and this goes back to, we don't keep jobs anymore for more than 5 years. Our employers are, the corporations, they do not care about you. And it's hard to say that. And if they can find a mechanism to save money, they will. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think it's really sad, particularly in creative industries like the video games. It's very tech driven, but it's very creative.
Mm-hmm.
But AI, we are straight up in an arms race right now with China, and China is doing some very interesting things. The United States is kind of going all in on it. I read an interesting article a couple weeks ago. I'm sure 100% how this is true, but their argument was that a lot of the venture capitalists and institutional funders over the past 30 years have lost a tremendous amount of money on these bets like blockchain, crypto. Like they've been putting a lot of money into these things that haven't paid off. And a lot of these VCs view AI as like their last ditch effort. And if AI doesn't pay out, they're dead. So that's why we're seeing so much money and interest in this space right now.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I do think like the optimistic Star Trekian part of me is like, yeah, we should be going with AI. We should be creating a world in which we can use AI to automate a lot of the mundane tasks that we don't need to do. But while we're doing that, we also need to be structuring a society that's going to be capable of, taking that change on. Because right now we're taking the like, oh, the companies can become more efficient side of it. But then what do you do with the hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are not going to have jobs? Trucking is one that keeps getting brought up a lot. Trucking is on the verge of almost total AI automation. And they're like, well, they'll just learn to code. Like, really? You expect, hundreds of thousands of truckers who maybe have been in doing their thing. Maybe they own their own rig, right? And they own their own business. You expect them to like jump over to coding? Like, I'm not saying they can't do it, but that's a big shift.
You're speaking my language as a guy who went from coding to trucking. So
yeah, there you go.
I'm just kidding, but yeah, it's a complicated thing to try to figure out. And then you bring up, the go code. And it's like, I would say in 2016, when I went into software engineering, it was just a great move. It was a great move because it was something that I learned pretty quickly things. And so it's like, I could, provide for my family that way. But that's all changing. Like it seems to me that a lot of those coding jobs are the sort of work that I did is the sort of work that could easily be replaced by AI
Yeah.
if it already hasn't,
Oh, I mean,
So
AI is showing IBM's Watson. So we have an IBM headquarters here where Watson is located. It's already way better at imaging analysis than doctors are. We see a lot of, like you mentioned, ChatGPT, a lot of these programs, OpenAI, ChatGPT. I mean, not Grok. Grok sucks, but lawyers, paralegals, like there's a really interesting. So let me give you an example from the video game industry. There's a woman named Ashley Birch. She's an actress. She plays Aloy from the Horizon series. She's also done a lot of movies and stuff. There was this big kind of thing where Guerrilla Games, who makes that game, it got leaked. It was like this like demo kind of prototype thing where they used her kind of imaging and AI voice to replicate without ever asking her. She had no idea it existed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they say their intent was just like, this was an internal thing. They were just testing. It was never meant to like go out there. Right. But like that kind of stuff is happening. And she brought up a really, really good point that I think applies to every industry, which is when you first start out, you're working your way up through the industry, right? You need those little opportunities. Like nobody goes from being a unknown actor to Tom Cruise, right? That takes a while to get there. And when you talk about Ashley Birch was mentioning in voice acting for video games and animation, your early work isn't lead characters. It's going in and doing all these like what are called barks, like fighting sounds, like like screams and things like that. You're acting as little voices for NPCs, non-player characters, the characters that are in the background. Yeah. So maybe you're walking through a town and you hear little conversations going on, right? All that little stuff. All that stuff now is starting to be AI generated. So voice actors, they have no in to be able to like, how do I work with a voice director? How do I work in a studio with a booth? Like there's no opportunities for them to get their foot in the door. And you're seeing that with a lot of industries now where those bottom to middle tier jobs are just disappearing.
Right.
And I'll say this one thing. I always point this out because again, I'm a Star Trek guy. I really think we should be focusing towards moving in that direction instead of like this Hunger Games dystopian direction, but where the goal of life isn't like the accumulation of things. It's the building and growth of yourself. Right.
Right.
And what's really interesting, a lot of people will say that's like this frou-frou hippie thing. Right. There is a documentary called Born Rich. I think it's still on YouTube. Actually, I think Ivanka Trump's in it when she was very, very, very young. And it's about, I can't remember his name, but he's one of the heirs to the Johnson & Johnson fortune.
Okay.
And he's about to turn like 18 or 21. And he does this little documentary. This was filmed in like the early 2000s, like pre all this stuff, right? And he just goes and talks about his life as he's about to inherit like this insane amount of money. And there's a really interesting moment where he interviews his dad. And his dad he works on a lot of boards, but he's never really had like a job the way we kind of think of it.
Yeah.
And he spends his time reading, learning things, bettering himself, spending time with family and loved ones because he has the money to be able to do that. So that's kind of the secret is like when people at the top or tell you like, oh, this vision that I'm putting across is like this hippie vision. I was like, no, man, this is what rich people do all day. They have constructed a world where they can spend the time how they want to, bettering themselves. And that's what I wish for all of us. So I don't know if that answers your AI question, but
well, it goes a long way towards it, and it's fascinating. And it made me think of something that, I'm just going to say back in the day, I don't know how long ago, the old black and white pictures of coal miners, for instance, in either in America or other countries, 60-hour work week or whatever, covered in soot. Like I've just seen a lot of pictures like this, and you think that person's life was 60 or 70 hours a week in the mine until they died. And I think if you were to ask them, what would it be like to have a 40-hour work week? They would think, well, that's never going to happen. That's insane. And it's hard when you're in a system that we look back on it now and say, oh, I'm so glad that's not our life right now. We're living already in a way that they could never imagine. to your point, what you're getting at is I think that we don't have an imagination for what could happen on the good side, leveraging technology if we actually organize the society in a right way. It's, and that's, I think we do need to have an imagination for how that can work. Do you know people who are doing that sort of thinking, who are talking in that way, in a way that might help us to build that kind of an imagination?
Yeah, I do. I think that unfortunately, right now, that it tends to not be the sort of tech leads that we think of. Unfortunately, it tends to be a lot of the people kind of on the ground or middle floor. But I want to hit on something like this. I like that imagination. And, so similar to you, I grew up, I was in a very nice, neighborhood. I never had to worry about food or a roof over my head. But my dad, talk about coal. My grandpa was chasing trains to get the coal that would fall off of them so they could heat their house, you know? So we came from that sort of understanding of a hard day's work is what you do, and you're responsible to your family and your community. And I still think that most of us feel that way. But what's happened is when you talk about imagination, which I think is really wild, we're the United States of America. How are we suffering from a lack of imagination? Aren't we the country that can do anything? I mean, we went to the moon, come on now.
Right.
But really what I think you're hitting at is that how you spend money is how you show your priorities. And right now as a society, I mean, we're talking today on the day that they're cutting the funding for NPR, and I mean,
right, I know.
We're strangling Sesame Street here. Is that really a priority,
right,
for society? Right. And this really goes back to sort of my ultimate message, which is we should be taking the success that others have, your Jeff Bezoses, your Elon Musks, your whoever, that have achieved those successes because of the tens of trillions of dollars of investment that we all have made into this sandbox that we call America. And when you hit that success, we then ask you to pay, taxes are the way we kind of navigate that, right? We ask that you pay the sort of responsible amount of taxes back into the system so that we can keep the infrastructure updated and keep the tools updated and make sure we're all educated and whatever. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in leadership that just don't want that or don't care. And I just find it really sad because I love this country. I love Ohio. I think Ohio is a great state. I think it gets a lot of crap, some of it deservedly so, but I love it as a state. And it's at the end of the day, it's we're kind of just asking these people to be just a little less greedy, not even that much less greedy, but just a little less greedy. And ultimately, I think it would help them too. As somebody who owns a business, I want my people. The first thing I did before I hired my first employee was I made sure that we had health benefits, health, dental, and vision, because I wanted to make sure that when my people came into work, they didn't have to worry about if they got sick or anything like that. They could just go take care of it. My artist just had her first baby 2 days ago, and I was like, you go off on maternity leave. I didn't even give her a date or a time. You take as long as you need to do it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we will see a really big change both in our economic structure and all our social structure, and just our being able to breathe again. If we reset our priorities in a way where everybody is benefiting from everybody else's success.
Right. Yeah. So I have two quick follow-ups on that. One is the reason I said bingo when you talked about how these people are benefiting from trillions of dollars of building this sandbox over generations. That's a huge missing piece. That was a huge missing piece in my understanding as a young conservative listening to Rush Limbaugh, going back to those days and stuff, where you hear all this messaging around, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you want
to know what's funny about that?
So you deserve it.
That pulling up by your bootstraps, that statement in its original form is supposed to be a joke about how you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
That's funny.
That's what
hilarious.
like that's what that means. Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah. So it's like, but this was a huge missing piece for me to realize that the people who end up at the top of this system are, yes, they worked hard for the most part, unless you inherit it like Donald Trump or something like that. But they worked hard, but they worked hard within a system where if their employees don't show up for work, they've got nothing. If there aren't, it's easy to say the roads, okay, yeah, we need roads, but all of this infrastructure around this cultural infrastructure that's been built that builds a stable culture that allows us to excel. I think that conservatives underrate that.
Absolutely.
And that's something
Stability
I've learned.
is so important.
Right. Yeah, that's something I've learned, is that conservatives underrate that. And my big wake up call where I saw that was sort of halfway through my ministry years when I went to Manila, Philippines, to visit a friend of mine.
That's where I lived.
Oh, okay.
When my dad was in the Navy. Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. So I was still, probably would have considered myself a conservative then, but I saw a culture in Manila. He was working with street children, so there were like 70,000 street children there at that time. And what I saw was, here's what happens when you don't have a safety net of some sort. You don't have a government that's investing in you had thousands of street kids, and they'd be right around a house where there's a helicopter pad on top. Because there's like a totally wealthy. But then I also saw, and again, thinking as a Republican, I went somewhere, saw something different and changed, because I saw also environmental regulation stuff where we went to buy fish, the fish market, and there was all this fish laying there with these people laying out on the street, this fish. And my friend said, we can't buy that because that's the poisonous fish. And it was because the poor people couldn't afford the boats to get out of Manila Bay. So they were fishing in Manila Bay, and the fish was poisonous. So they sold that fish really cheap. That was all the people could afford. And then if we wanted the good fish, which we could afford, we had to go over here. And those are the people who could afford the big boats to get outside of Manila Bay. Yeah. And I saw and it was, for me, it was sort of an aha moment that, oh, this stuff matters. The infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure that we build, and the economic infrastructure, all of this matters, and it doesn't happen on its own. On its own, all the wealth goes to the very top. Yeah. And you know what I'm saying? But I actually had to see something in order to learn that.
So that's really interesting, because I think, well, first of all, I want to mention that, because we've been talking sort of like a lot about MAGA and Republicans sort of in a negative light. But again, like there are legitimate concerns that Republicans and MAGA have. And I share those concerns. And I actually don't think they're I do not think the concerns of quote unquote liberal lefts and Republicans are that far off. Actually, there was a really great study like a decade ago that showed that if you ask people, it was like a variety of like top 20 most important things, almost all of America agrees on almost everything, including abortion, if you would believe it. Right. But as soon as you attach a political party or a politician to those questions, then it shifts dramatically based on whatever. But the important part I'm thinking here is because I do totally agree with you. I think a lot of people on the sort of right, or at least the sort of like standard conservative right, don't tend to think about all those infrastructure investments. Amazon would be nothing without the internet, and the internet exists because of a DARPA investment, a government investment. Almost every major technological progress in human history was started by the state, the crown, the government, something, right? Because that's, you go into those things when there's no clear ROI about it. You're like, well, we're going to go sail across and go try to find India because we think there might be a good trade route. And then, oh, we just bumped into a whole new continent here, right? Right. But what I find really interesting, and this is kind of things, Wealth of Nations by Smith, right? The sort of like, that's where you get the invisible hand from. Right. That is the framework for modern day free market economics.
Yeah.
I've actually got the book over there. I don't expect anybody to read it because it's like 1,500 pages of dense economic jargon. But in the first chapter and littered throughout that book, Smith is very clear that the free market needs a strong government to guide it.
Okay.
Because otherwise, what happens is exactly what you said, is that the corporate power becomes so large that there is no way for the people to begin to push against it. And that's
Right.
what the government offers. It offers this sort of large sort of collective leverage that can push against, we'll say people's lesser natures in certain ways. And so
Right.
even the guy who created the idea of the invisible hand of the market was very clear that you need a strong government to regulate this, because it's just going to get out of whack. And we're seeing that today. I think that the internet, for example, the internet's borderline unusable today. It's filled with ads. You mentioned using ChatGPT. I mean, you have to cross-reference anything that comes out of AI just to make sure that it's not lying to you.
Oh, right. I use it for research every day, and I ask for clickable links, and then I read the articles. I'm reading a lot more now because of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because it's giving me good things to read, but it's like I read them because you don't trust the way it adds it up.
I mean, I said the big, but the thing I really liked about the video I watched of yours was you kept using this term, the search for truth. You kept saying that. And I think that's a very powerful, because the search for truth implies a process, not like an end state. And that you're always thinking, and you're always like looking at something, and being like, okay, do I know this in fact to be true, or do I believe it to be true? And let me do some research. But knowing how to do, I mean, that's how they get you, because having to research everything is exhausting,
Right.
And
Right.
you want to just, at some points, you just want to believe somebody.
Right. Yep. And so I think there's three more things that I want to talk to you about that
Absolutely.
are all related.
I got nowhere to be.
And people can just listen, because this is I'm learning so much by talking to you. And they're all related to things that you already said, if I can get my brain around. Well, one of the things you talked about, how not conservative, you talked about how, you didn't say poor people, but basically a lot of people are being taken advantage of who vote MAGA. They're being taken advantage of by the MAGA movement. They have these legitimate concerns. And somebody warned me, in 2016, Donald Trump is going to win because he's speaking to people that the Democrats have stopped talking to, the coal miners, for instance, just to go back to that. And I just want to make an observation about this, but it might lead into the next thing about the faith issue. The way that I see it is in the same way that a lot of lower income people are being taken advantage of by MAGA. Christians are also being taken advantage of by MAGA. And so it's like you've got, and this links to another thing that you said, the unserious people. You've got unserious people right now at a time when we need serious people in office. You've got unserious people who've managed to leverage the anxieties and the grievances of the working class people and Christians. I would say like evangelical Christians. They've managed to bring these two groups together and say, and the big overriding message they seem to be giving is, the elites are out to steal from you, or the elites are out to take away your culture. That's what they're telling the Christians. But it's these unserious elites who are doing this, and that's a nut that I still haven't been able to crack. Like how do I talk to these people without, because I've been doing it for years now, without being offensive, to show this all started, like you said earlier, it didn't start from like opposing anyone. I saw Trump taking advantage of people, and specifically in my case, Christians. And I thought, I want to help them. It was a pastoral concern for the people who were being taken advantage of. It was a pastoral concern. And I saw the damage that he was doing to them emotionally and intellectually by telling them lies all the time. But you're talking a lot about the damage that are being done to people economically. And, but it's like, if there's a way to bring this together, to help people to understand, in a nutshell, these are unserious people who don't care about governing. That's why they're willing to burn it all down, all these systems that we've built up, because they're just monetizing their power right now. And they're monetizing our grievances. They're monetizing our anxieties. I don't know. I don't know how to talk about that, but there's some sort of message that I think, whether you call it the Democrats or the opposition or the pro-democracy, to find a way to bring all of that together, to say, here's what's happening. Anyway.
Yeah.
Monologue. Yeah.
No, I think you've hit on, this is the moment of our time, right? Like right. This is where we are at. And before I answer, I just think it's kind of funny. It's one of those great ironies that the guy that poops in a gold toilet is somehow not an elite, right? But
exactly.
Ignoring that.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what I said, where like those are legitimate complaints. Like they feel like the elites have, gotten one over on us and they're trying to screw us. And the answer is, you are correct. They are in fact. And one of the things I say is, like, when you talk about, I know, again, we're painting with a broad brush here, but when you talk about sort of like elites, they absolutely set the system up for their advantage. And right. There isn't necessarily like this cabal of elites that sits and talks and decides. They're all kind of fighting amongst themselves as well to set things up. But the problem is they don't care what the collateral damage is to folks like you and me in that process. And so when you think about this sort of, overarching elite conversation, one of the things I say is, like, you just have to remember that, like, they don't care about you, most of them. And it's actually kind of even worse than that, is like, they don't even think about us. Like we are not a part of their calculations on a human level a lot of times. Right. And I hate kind of being that broad. But there's a quote I always loved, which is, every system is perfectly designed to give you the results that you get. And these are the results that we are getting because of the system that was in place. And this system didn't just fall out of the sky. Like, these were deliberate decisions that got us where we are. But going forward, to sort of answer your question, you mentioned one thing. I think tackling poverty is huge. I think poverty is the number one sort of like baseline thing that affects all of us. And I think a lot of people, when you talk about poverty, a lot of people think about like, oh, homeless people in the streets. I'm talking about like poverty impacts all of us in a very meaningful way. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you are one bad day away potentially from poverty. And so implementing the structures that would remove poverty, it goes across racial lines, it goes across gender lines, goes across religious lines. So I think that's a big thing. For me, though, wrapping all of this together, I think the answer is that this is trust. That's what it is. We have lost trust in our institutions. We have lost trust in each other. Donald Trump in particular has managed to take that mistrust of these things and sort of bend it to his will. So now nobody trusts anything about it. We just can't, we have no common understanding of even what it means to be an American these days. Right. And so what I've been doing is being like, okay, let's forget about all the categorizations and everything that we used to. I mean, conservative doesn't even mean anything anymore, right? Republican doesn't really mean anything. I don't even think Democrat means anything anymore. So instead of worrying about like kind of trying to litigate these categories as if like it's like a spelling bee or we're a thesaurus, let's just talk about the things that people actually care about that impact them every day and begin to build that vision of where we can go. And those include things like I mentioned, I think healthcare for one. I think that we should have access to a 4-year public education or vocational school to provide, because I mean, Education is the number one thing that can pull people out of poverty. Welfare is always interesting because, you know, it's been so weaponized over the past things, and the same with DEI. But the number one recipients of both welfare, food stamps, and, you know, these DEI initiatives are white women. Like that's who receives most of the benefits. And we have seen time and time again that the quickest way to make a really powerful, strong society is to support and educate your women. Like
okay.
that because they're the ones that ultimately are generally the decision makers in the family. They are navigating the financial decisions. Like, and so like there's these steps that we can take that actually are very in line with both Democratic and Republican ideas. You know, like I love this conservative thing. We should run the government like a business, right? I was like, well, first of all, we really shouldn't, because the government does other things. But my response to that is always like, okay, I'm down. So that means we should be investing in our infrastructure. Do you agree with that? And then you're like, oh, yeah, sure. And then that means that we should be educating our workforce and providing benefits. Like all of the things that these big corporations do to make sure that they can run effectively in this global economy. If that's actually what you mean by running the government like a business, then like, all right, I'm in. But that's not what they mean. They mean that everything should make money is what they mean.
Right.
And so I think ultimately,
Can I just add?
yeah, please.
Another thing that businesses would do is they put serious people in charge.
Yeah.
I'll just throw that in. So.
Yeah. So I was gonna run back to the serious people thing, because we have, again, this is a part of a much longer conversation that has to deal with our electoral system, the electoral college, and things like that, is that we have created a system in which it's like roughly like 80% of any given seat in any given election is pretty much uncontested, right? And so at that point, you know, Ohio is going to be a pretty drag out, you know, knockdown kind of fight for the Senate here. But in most states, that's a rarity, and you can't actually have really meaningful conversation if 70% of the elected representatives don't have to answer to anybody, because they just know they'll get elected, right? And so that's very, very problematic. But even more than that, I think that and this is a message I've been pushing, we need to expect more from our leaders, and we need to sort of be better ourselves, and we need to actually be a little bit more humble. You mentioned humility in one of your other videos, where I think there is sort of a lack of humility in the world, where, you know, as someone who's running for Senate, I fully admit I don't know everything, and I'm not going to pretend like I do. And that's why I'm out talking to people. Like there's a dairy farm that I really like here in Ohio that makes the chocolate milk for my coffee. I'm going to go meet and talk to them. I don't know anything about dairy farming, right? So I'm going to go and talk to people who do live it and understand it, so that they can express to me what's important, and then I can go and advocate for that. But
exactly.
But right now, there's so many people in our legislature. Like, look at the Senate. Just again, for example, you mentioned AI, but just look at tech. You remember the series of tubes when they were talking about the internet? Like one of the senators, like, oh, it's just like a series of tubes. I was like, you guys, and you can see it on, like, when Mark Zuckerberg and others are up there, you can see it on their face. They were like, what in the hell are you guys talking about? Because they just do not understand at a basic level what this technology is and how it works.
He'd probably seen the movie Brazil at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway, so,
and so to expect them to understand what it's like to be a 26-year-old new graduate, I mean, you know, I make this joke, but like I work one day a week at my local gym here. I work the front desk. I'm mopping the floors at the end of the night and cleaning. I was like, my opponent, John Husted, our current senator, is like, I don't even know if that dude's seen a mop in the last 5 years. Yeah, he's certainly not mopping the gym floors, right? And so I think there just is a total lack of awareness on what people are really going through.
Yeah, and again, I think that one of the things that, coming from my old conservative background, was that, I mean, I grew up under Reagan. And it was the single most frightening sentence in the English language is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you."
Yeah, I'm here to help.
So it's like I was steeped in that sort of thing, and it takes a lot to help people to just break out and to realize, those sorts of slogans aren't meant to help you. Actually, those sorts of slogans are meant to get you to vote for things that are so far against your interests, and so it's
and there's real fast. There are,
yeah.
We're sitting here on a podcast, we're chatting, after we finish, I'm gonna drink my coffee and get back to work on my nice laptop. And like, I'm doing okay. I'm not wealthy, but right now I'm doing okay. The business is a little rocky because of the world, but I'm doing all right. There are people that have real consequences happening to them right now,
right?
Where, we talked about the big, beautiful bill, the upcoming Medicaid cuts. Just as one thing, that is going to result in rural hospitals closing. And a lot of folks that are in these sort of quote unquote red areas, I don't really think there are red and blue areas. That's just an aberration of our election system. But,
right.
I don't want these people to be in a situation where like I think about my friend who has cancer, right? We live in Columbus, Ohio. The hospital he's going to for his treatment, I take him there, multiple days a week. He's a 2-minute drive from me, and the hospital is a 5-minute drive from him. Mm-hmm. There are places in Ohio where it could be a 2-hour drive to get to the next hospital capable of providing your cancer treatment. And like, wow. That's just, and that's, so you're going 2 hours there, 90 minutes, 2 hours there, 90 minutes, 2 hours back. Like, that is a big, big inconvenience for particularly a working class person who maybe doesn't have the insurance or is maybe on Medicaid, and now Medicaid is going to dry up. Like, these are real things. These Doge cuts that just passed while we were sitting here. Mm-hmm. Think about, just for a second, the federal cuts that happened in February. Remember when like all of the federal funding just froze? Mm-hmm. There was healthcare, cancer research, Parkinson's research, all that kind of stuff that just stopped, right? Because the money stopped. And you're like, oh, well, the money came on 2 or 3 days later. You're like, okay, most of those protocols don't allow for a 3-day gap. If there is a gap in that research protocol, the whole thing has to be redone from scratch, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of those programs probably don't have a secondary source of funding to ramp that back up. So just in the back of your mind, think about, God forbid, I hope this never happens to you, but in the next, not you particularly, any of us, in the next 10, 20 years, if you get cancer, in the back of your mind, there's going to be like, hey, did the thing that would have helped me in my treatment get delayed or potentially stopped because of this willy-nilly funding cut that had no real thought behind it? Like, there are serious repercussions to what's going on here.
Yeah, all these invisible costs that we might never see, opportunity costs, that sort of thing. So one guy that I listen to that I feel like, I don't know what you think of him, but he has a lot to say about some of these things, is Scott Galloway.
Yeah, Scott Galloway, yeah.
But one thing that Scott Galloway talks about a lot, and I want to hit on this because you brought up, I agree with you about educating our women, like any culture, like this is a way up, is to make sure that women are educated. But Scott Galloway does point this out as a tension within the Democratic Party on some level, about men, where they're, young men. I mean, he's just all over that. And so again, while agreeing exactly with what you just said, what do you think about young men? What are some things that could help young men in Ohio that the government could play a role in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is when I see, investing and educating in young women, that's not at the detriment of young men.
Right. Like, exactly. I know what you mean. I just want to help you to get a chance to say this. Yeah.
And I think too, I've actually had a couple of conversations because there has been this, we talk about the pendulum swinging in society back and forth, and there's been this big push towards, if you want to call it an anti-man bias, like that's fine, however you want to call it. And some of it, again, is deservedly so. I think Trump is a perfect example of this guy who's failed upwards his entire life because of his access to power and money and resources. But there is a legitimate sort of both identity crisis and depression crisis in men. A lot of this has to do with social media, where we're just kind of in this weird space where There's this really good, I'll try to email it to you if I can. I don't remember who it was, but he's this YouTuber who went through his journey where he used to be hardcore conservative, into MAGA, into white nationalist, and then came about on the other side. And he's like, I can't believe some of the things that I believed. And one of the things he points out is that and even he was a little weird because he was a theater kid. And so he was connected to a lot of, gay folks. He had a trans friend. And so he was he had this dissonance in his mind between what he was hearing and his personal experience, but it took him years to break away from that. And he said that he found home in these message boards and these forums and these online things. So I think that the answer, I've been kind of yammering here for a second, but the answer to all of this is like, why don't we start treating people with kindness and respect? And there's no way that you can tell me that like an 8, 12, 10-year-old boy is deserving of this sort of vitriol, right? These kids, these boys don't know what's going on. They're just sort of modeling what they've been told. And there is a reality, and I say this from the bottom of my heart to my sort of more democratic lefty friends, like nobody wants to be preached to and yelled at all the time. So if you're constantly in this world where you're like, I'm trying to make meaningful connections with people, like just pretend you're a young boy, 13, 14 years old, whatever. I'm trying to make meaningful connections. All I know how to do is to model behavior based on what I'm seeing in school and on TV. And every time I try to reach out, I keep getting all this pushback because maybe I'm not saying things the right way or approaching things the right way.
Word. Yeah.
Like, of course, they're going to eventually just be like, all right, screw this. Like, nobody wants to get yelled at all the time, right?
Right.
Now, the other side of that coin is that you don't excuse bad behavior. You don't pretend that like misogynistic behavior, racial behavior or whatever is acceptable. You need to correct that behavior, but maybe show like a little bit of empathy. I remember, I can't remember who said it, but it was in regards to religion. And they were like, empathy is sort of the key to belief. To avoid sort of blind belief, empathy is the key that unlocks that door that allows you to think about the world outside of your own lens. And I think that I'm firmly one of those believers that I don't think kindness is a weakness. I think you can be kind and strong at the same time. I just don't know if I was going to say the Democratic Party, but I don't know if just us in general have figured out necessarily how to do that. But I, for one, am perfectly comfortable in being both kind and pushing back on folks. And the reason I say that is this ties back to a question you asked me an hour ago, which is, in addition to the software development stuff I do, I've been building a video game industry here in Ohio and building this community of, we've got tens of thousands of people that are a part of this community. I've connected all the universities together. I've connected a lot of the businesses together. But a significant part of what I do is sort of correction within the community, both on a professional level from a kind of a professional development perspective, but also, I love gaming. I'm a gamer, but like, we're all kind of weirdos. Like, we're introverted, kind of that. And sometimes, there are a lot of people on the spectrum, and sometimes they just aren't quite sure how to navigate. And so I have to step in and do a little bit of correction where it's like, hey, I understand what you're saying, but our community functions this way, and we need to be open to these sort of things and give them the opportunity to grow and to change.
Yeah, that's excellent. And there's just so much work that needs to be done with young men, I think. And because I just see again, it's this exploitation thing that I see from a lot of, and I'm sure it happens all across the political spectrum a little bit, but most of the exploiters of loneliness right now, I think, are over on the right, and they're exploiting people's isolation. They're exploiting, this is what I see. And anyone who can speak into that, I think is necessary, doing good work.
I think, just reminding young men and young women, this is a statement I gave over Pride when there was a lot of like the anti-LGBT and trans stuff. It's just like, you are important, you are loved, and you do deserve all the good things that life can give you. And that takes, I mean, most of us spend our entire lives trying to internalize that feeling and understand that. Like, that's not something you're going to get at 16, right? But at least if we can remind people occasionally of that, that there are people around you that do care about you and want to see you succeed. And I say this to everybody, including like Republicans. My goal in running for Senate here is not to like, again, I'm not trying to get anything. Like, I want to see you succeed. That's why I'm doing this. And on a more positive note, I will kind of remind people that like the folks in charge right now at the like upper administrative level, like most of these people are like narcissists and opportunists.
Right.
And the thing with folks like that who are kind of only in it for themselves is eventually the mask falls, and then you've got a room filled with vipers that are going to start stabbing each other. Right. And now that
we're seeing some of that right now.
Yeah, we're seeing some of that right now. Now, of course, that's not where you want your leadership to be, particularly in the, the strongest, best country in the world. But it does mean that there is a opportunity for people that do care in good faith and who are intellectually honest. There is room for them to come in and make the world a better place. So don't lose hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So I'm just going to ask one final thing, and you can say as little or as much as you want about this. So my channel name is Culture, Faith, and Politics. We've talked a lot about culture. We've talked a fair amount about politics. And then like you said at the very beginning, you're, not a religious person. And what for myself right now, if somebody's listened to this long into the podcast, they like me well enough that I can say this. I actually prefer at this point people who are not, I'm not saying that don't have the same faith as me. It's more that I prefer electing leaders who aren't viewing it through a lens of a specific faith, because I've only seen that abused lately. And when you've got the faith being distorted by people at the top, faith leaders at the top who are distorting it and weaponizing faith, I just would rather not have people who are involved in those movements. So my point is, what I'm looking for in anybody that I vote for, I don't care what faith they are, lack of faith, I don't care. What I'm looking for is a code that I understand, where it's like this person has a code that they live by, that they can articulate, and that they're going to be true to that code, because then I know how they operate. And so just in general, what would you say to somebody who says, so what makes you tick? What are the things you care about? What is your code that you live life by? Does that make
Sure.
sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah. No, I would love to have a conversation on this, because actually, strangely enough, since I started my campaign, I've probably had the most conversations with religious people. And I don't know what it is about me that maybe attracts them to wanting to have a conversation with me. And I should say, like, they've all been perfectly pleasant, even when, we've come to points where there's obvious disagreement. So, I mean, I think for me, like, my whole shtick in life has just always been to try to better myself, to be the best version of myself I can be, and to help everybody around me do the best that they can do. And I running for Senate's a big deal. I get that. And there's a lot of like ego and money and stuff in it. And when I go around, particularly, and talk to like political operatives, a lot of them just don't even quite know how to handle me, because they're used to like navigating in this world. And I'm just like, this is not an ego play for me, right? Like I'm doing this because I think that I can be helpful in making America and Ohio a better place. And so my North Star, if you want, it's always been, am I helping people? Am I contributing to, it's really silly, but one of my sayings, my dad used to say, is just, are you leaving the world a better place than when you found it? Like, it's a pretty fundamental thing. It's funny, our sort of family logo has always been knowledge is no weight to carry. And that's from a very early age, that's always struck me as like, okay, I should be trying to learn and understand as much as I can about the world that I inhabit for these, 80 years that I'm going to be around or whatever. And I think that actually gels, and maybe this is where you could kind of come in. I think that kind of gels with a lot of religious folk, because even though I don't believe there is a God, if you do believe that there is a God in whatever form that takes, then the staples being kind to your neighbors, making sure to have humility and reverence for sort of just the wonder of what's around you. A big one is the planet. If you're a believer, most religions that believe in a God also believe that God created the world, and the earth is the providence of God, and thus it's your responsibility to take care of it. So, it's easy to sort of brush away these like sort of, for lack of a better term, atheists. I don't really use that term, but atheists versus religious, things are like, oh, you're going to be butting heads all the time. And you're actually no, there's a lot where we can be side by side on these things. And even something like, I'll just bring up abortion because it's such a central point for a lot of people. I always say when it comes to abortion, I totally get it. Like I totally get where the pro-life group is coming from. And I think at the end of the day, like I 100% could see you checking that box because it makes total sense. My direction where I come from on that is that I think that there's a lot of nuance and complexity that comes from, abortion, women's health, and all of that you can't just boil it down into a simple yes or no. And in my opinion, and I also believe that the world is a better place when 50% of our population is able to make the decisions about themselves and their body and their family than the government. Now, you might believe that the world is a better place if we don't have abortions. And at some point in that argument, we're going to kind of be here and we're not going to be able to resolve that. And I tell people, like, if that is an issue that is like so important to you that you can't move from it in any way, I totally get it. And one of the things I've been saying as a candidate, which is a weird thing for a politician to say, is like, I'm not trying to convince you to vote for me. I'm not really trying to convince you of anything. I guess what I am asking you to do is be open-minded, and can you trust me? Can you trust that even if we're not going to agree on everything, that I'm going to have your back? I'm going to try to have your back as best I can at the end of the day. And if you feel that you can trust me and that trust translates into a vote, that's awesome. But if you feel like for whatever reason you can't, that's okay too.
And that's why I think an hour and a half long conversation is so helpful, because in an hour and a half, you can hear how a person thinks. You can hear, I'm hearing how you process. I'm hearing how you approach life. And trust comes from actually, and returning all the way back to, by the way, on the abortion thing, we're probably not very far off right now on where I've ended up in terms of the government involvement in it. So it's like, I've been on a journey. It's so painful it's such a painful topic. It is on so many different levels for people. And so I've been on a journey with that. But to bring it back full circle to, you started by talking about Kamala Harris a little bit, and I don't think you were critical. I don't remember that you said anything critical, but you talked about how she had some messaging that was really good around, for instance, the pro-democracy, anti-authoritarian thing. And then she sort of let some of that go or whatever. And I see this with the abortion issue, another issue where basically I felt like Donald Trump can say whatever the hell he wants, and nobody's going to hold him accountable. Kamala Harris, as a Black woman who was being kind of introduced to the country on short notice, and I know she'd been vice president, but she had to be so careful with every word that she said, and which I thought, again, it's this asymmetrical nature of our communication environment right now, where but it's like the way that she talked about the abortion issue was so careful. The every word was like, and I know why she had to do that on a national level.
Yeah.
But I was listening to her and I was thinking, you're not able to say something that I know all of these people who are just listening and saying, she's not saying it. She's not saying this is morally complex. She's not saying, she did say, you have your religious beliefs, and I have, and
she used that deeply held religious beliefs line. She kept using.
Yeah, and it's like, and I understand why she said it, and I think it was workshopped and all that. But there is something about just being what you just did, where you're saying, "I understand why you feel this way. I get it. I don't agree, but it's morally complex. I understand why for you it's morally complex." You know what I mean? And those kinds of conversations are really hard to have. But
It's
I
almost
feel like they,
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
It's almost
Yeah.
a little different because it's like I hesitate to use the phrase. I'm being a little nitpicky, so please forgive me.
Hmm.
Of like
Yeah.
where I don't agree with you, because it's not even a case of I don't agree with you. It's like I totally agree with you. It's just we find ourselves in the reality of this world, and
Exactly.
that reality requires us to broaden our sort of decision making.
Right. And we're navigating it in this, hugely complex society. We're
Yeah.
navigating issues that are very difficult.
I would also say too, this is again, I always say I don't know anything about anything. I just say stuff, so take me for whatever.
Me too. Yeah.
But this idea that Kamala Harris had to keep couching her words is, I remember. So my friend who has cancer, he told me something like 20 years ago. We were talking about the difficulty of just fighting against oppression and things like that.
Mhm.
And one of the things he brought up is he's like, yeah, I see that. But he's like, yeah, I mean, you can't tell me that Galileo didn't have a hard time saying what was on his mind, right? Like, I mean, the dude got in prison, right? Like, history is full of these people that got in a lot of trouble or got killed because of their beliefs and what they said. And the thing I would say to Democrats, for whatever it's worth, I'm just a guy sitting in a chair here in Columbus,
Mhm.
is like, I don't know if Kamala Harris did have to do that. I think that she was convinced because of sort of how the consultancies and the process works, but like she lost, right? So that strategy didn't work. What would have happened if she would have just said, "Screw it. I'm just going to say what I think and what I feel and see where the chips land." And I think that she might have, I don't know if she would have won or not, but I think that a lot of the people that, and just strategically, like, do you really think a Democrat is going to get a lot of pro-choice votes in that 2024 election? Like with all the vitriol and all the advertising
The
that's going
pro-life votes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're probably not going to get a lot of the pro-life votes anyway.
Right.
So why don't you just say kind of what's on your mind and what you believe and see where it goes? But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, right. No, and that's, something I just hope that we learn some lessons about that. Again, I would say I'm part of the pro-democracy movement, and whatever that means. But one thing that it means is that I'm fighting against this idea that you brought up in the beginning about unserious people who are using who are playing on the fears and the anxieties of people. And it's like one way to fight that is to speak truth, but also to speak truth in a relatable way, which is how you started,
Yeah.
like you're trying to, and I just think you're on the right track.
And
Yeah.
we're also at a time where, I hate to say this, a lot of we're in a scary time. And I think we need to understand that we have to kind of come to terms with that and understand that the way of doing things, and I'm not advocating for aggression or violence or anything like that.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, look at for instance, look at the law firms that have sort of bent the knee to the Trump administration. And now it's ended up that they're losing a lot of their clients because people are like, if you're not going to fight against Trump to protect yourself, are you going to protect me as a client? Right.
Exactly.
And I am a firm believer that if you do the right thing and you are pushing a vision of care that's going to help people, like if if your product is good, then you should be able to stand up to those who are pushing back against it. And
Right.
I think in the end, the better of our angels will win. And I think we're kind of testing that in real time now.
Yeah, and that's my goal. That's why I do what I do, because I think there's hope. Otherwise, I would go golf every day and just but I believe there's hope, and I think these
I agree.
conversations get us somewhere. They help people to process this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and so good luck with your campaign. It's just exciting to talk to you and to hear you at the front end of this. I'll be watching to see how things go, where they
Thanks.
go. But I just think you're making a really valuable contribution. I really appreciate the way that you talk about these issues, and I appreciate that you reached out because we just need to have conversations like this to help people figure out next steps. Where do we go? What kind of culture are we trying to build here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed the closing remarks there. Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think there are far more people that are just trying to make their way through the world and, like you said, process what's going on and understand it. And I think that there are a lot of folks that can't even believe that there would be people that would be willing to do these kind of things to hurt us. And and processing that and realizing that is a scary thing, particularly if it's like someone from your family.
Right.
I mentioned I have family members that I currently don't talk to because of their behavior and the way they act. It's just so cruel. And it's weird because those aren't the people, the uncles and whatever that I grew up with as a kid. Like that's not how, and that's not how I want to remember them. And I think that a lot of folks are beginning to see and realize that there is hope in the world, and that when we come together, I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, but like there really is no end to what we can accomplish as a people here.
Yeah. And I quoted a few days ago in one of my videos, Alexander Solzhenitsyn saying, you can't solve the problems in the world by just identifying the evil people and getting rid of them, because the line between good and evil runs through the human heart. And I think that's true, that there's dark impulses in humans and there's good impulses. And what I see it currently is the MAGA movement, but there have been movements like this throughout history that appeal to the dark parts of the human heart. And so then you have family members that are falling into that and stuff. And it's like, but they're not evil. They're being appealed to on this level, that we all have somewhere in us to some degree. And so just, talking and
I totally agree. I think
showing empathy.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been really doing, again, you can see it on my YouTube video, but just remembering that, like, at the end of the day, in my humble opinion, Donald Trump is a con man.
Right.
And con men are really good at convincing you that you're not the problem. It's all these other things. And it's just like fill in the blank. It doesn't even matter what the problem is. But at the end of the day, he is trying to trick you. And so the people, like you said, like, I don't think my family is evil, but I do have trouble navigating, particularly in this instance, several of them are very religious, navigating the sort of teachings of Jesus versus what I'm hearing coming out of their mouth and what I see them doing. It is troubling. But I think that deep down in the center of all of this, like, I think that the brightness will win out.
Right. Yeah. And I'm with you. That's why I do what I do. So thank you so much, Chris Volpe. And I'll put the links to your websites and stuff down in the comments too. But if you want to say again where people can find you.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad we had it. So Volpe for America is all the social media, VOLPE for America. The website's the same thing. The big thing right now, I'm not sure when this video will come out, but we're doing I just launched my donate page for the campaign. We're trying to get $10,000 in July here. So that's our first goal. But yeah, it was a pleasure being here. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.